Hey everybody, this is Perch. Blacklists in comics, do they exist? Well, if you've been following along over the last, say, 5 years, we've swung around quite a bit. First, we were told blacklists didn't exist. No way, that's a paranoid conspiracy thought. They were like, well, maybe they exist a little bit. And then we were told, no, it only exists for the people who have earned it, who are really, bad people. And then we were told that, well, then we get a bunch of like weird PSAs like, hey, pro tip, PSA to my fellow creators, don't do this or you won't be hired. And a bunch of those sounded kind of douchey. And it was usually one creator saying this to other creators. So it's like, well, you're not even hiring people. So is this insider knowledge that you have there? Are you an editor? Are you on good terms with Tom Brevoort, or are you just making this up because that's what you think, or are you giving good common sense? I mean, one aspect to all of this that is important to keep in mind is generally, and this is the simplest explanation. It doesn't apply to everything. Don't get me wrong; it doesn't work for everything, but it's a kind of a baseline you can start from, and that's if you're difficult to work with, you typically won't get hired. Now, what does difficult to work with mean? Well, it can mean a lot of things. Unfortunately, that's a very wide spectrum of things. It could be that this particular editor doesn't communicate well with you. Here's an example that's unfortunate but true. Is there's an editor at DC who struggled to work with Asian creators because he had trouble understanding them. And this got known through, at least some Asian creators. This guy no longer works at DC, to be clear. And it's not even like it's people have in the past and are quick to say, "Well, he's a racist," and it's again that's a label very quick to apply to somebody. You need to be sure about what you're saying. If you have trouble hearing somebody else, and your job is to solicit talent, I think you need to do a better job of trying to understand people. I think that's on you, not the other person, to talk clearer. I think that's especially when it's an accent of some kind based on nationality. I think it's on you to figure that out. And just full stop. I just and by the way, people have taken plenty of shots at me in the comments before, especially this one guy who likes to come in and just do a lot of straw manning. I think you should be careful when throwing around the word racist. I think you should just make sure of your facts, make sure you're doing the right, make sure of that label that you're casually tossing around, because that word has a ton of meaning. So just make sure. Does that qualify as racism? Somebody, I think when you get to the point that you stop hiring them, which is what this guy did, then yeah, you have an argument there that that's racism. You say you can't understand why it's all one group of people, and you stop hiring them for jobs, then you're taking action on something that's. So anyway, that's how I view it. But again, your mileage may vary. I just think you should be careful if you're tossing that word around. A lot of people toss that word around very casually. But the point here is what's quote unquote difficult to work with can be a very long list, and not a fair list either. It could be something very simple that is fair, like this person, is always late, doesn't turn in their work on time. It can be that the person's belligerent and and argues too much, or just a headache. You can have somebody who's kind of a prima donna, somebody who always demands more than they're worth. And generally, when you're a hiring manager or you're an editor and you're bringing on freelancers, you do a value to difficulty equation in your head. You're like, well, this person is difficult to work with. How much business do they bring in? If they bring in a ton of business, most people will suck it up and deal with the hardworking individual, even if they don't consciously know they're doing that. It's this interesting phenomenon that if you're successful, if you have wealth, miraculously people will, in many cases, not see your annoying behavior. They won't see how difficult you are to work with, because in their mind is clouded by all the money you're going to make. And this isn't necessarily wrong, but that's another fact of life. If you're difficult to work with, people will call you less. That's different from being blacklisted. That's being just subtly, pushed out. If you get a reputation of, maybe you're given scripts and then you leak the scripts and you tell people your plans and then they gossip it all around, it can be traced back to you. That could be an issue. It can be, again, fair or not fair. In the past, have there been editors who didn't want to work with women and thus wouldn't hire them? Yeah, there have been. That has happened in the past. And that's one of those cases where the statement, hiring a woman is not worth it, or they're too difficult to work with, has been said. It guaranteed it's been said. We know it has been said. We've heard people admit to saying it and then changing their mind down the road. So that's an example of an unfair thing. A fair reason, like I said, is you make an ass out of yourself. That's most commonly what's going on in comics. Now, comics is it's a fast churning business, and there's not a lot of money in it. So in many cases, editors are not investing massive hours of their time to carefully curate a team. They're going for path of least resistance, and so they're going to hire people that aid them in that least resistance goal. If you are seen as providing resistance, then they won't hire you. Worse, if maybe the editor likes you but others don't, and the editor is worried about taking crap from other people, they may not hire you, because it's like, well, I think this person's work is good. I've always worked well from them, but if I hire them, then suddenly a bunch of people on Twitter are gonna bitch for 5 solid weeks, and I don't want. It's worth that. Now I'll just go to the next name on the list. That's most commonly what is happening. There are, I've been told by a number of people, there are no hire lists. Pure people get on that list, and it really doesn't matter whether you're easy to work with or not. You've done something to land you on this no hire list. Now, as far as I can understand, the no hire list is relatively small. Now, first thing you might say is, should there be a no hire list? And the answer is absolutely there should be. There absolutely should be. If, for example, you got the company into legal problems, if you stole work, if you, stole somebody's story, if you got caught swiping to a massive degree to the point where you're giving your your company a major headache, then yeah, you should not be hired again. You've definitely earned your spot. So I hear people every now and then say, there should be no such thing as a blacklist. Yeah, I mean, sure, yeah, that sounds all sweet and nice, but if you stole from a company, you deserve to be on that list. Now, the question becomes, do people get on that list for other reasons? Like, say, their politics. Well, it's, again, this is where you'll get a lot of argument. My gut tells me, and I know a lot of people in the comments will disagree, my gut tells me no. I don't think people get put on a no hire list that is officially handed around the company and it basically prevents them from working under any circumstance. I don't think politics does it. I have enough insight at both of the big two to be pretty certain of that. However, and it's a major however and underlined, and many of you may say, well, it all amounts to the same thing, and to some extent you're right, it does. If you're seen as difficult to work with, which again could be for unfair reasons, like say, maybe your politics, then you can find yourself just not picked by editors. Now you may say, why are you drawing this distinction? It is the same thing. It's not quite the same thing. One is done on a more individual by individual basis. It's done by editors who are making choices based on who they want to work with and what they perceive as being too hard to work with. The other is something that's more formal within the company. That means even if you, as an editor, want to work with this person, the company's legal department is going to tell you no. And those are two separate things. We've seen things change with the first situation, with the first list. People who were deemed as difficult to work with have found their way back into companies. Mark Waid was deemed difficult to work with at DC. He also caused them some troubles, and I think he probably came as close as anyone to being on that no hire list. There was certainly some directives from some senior management not to hire Mark Waid due to some things he did in his past. Now, clearly, that has now changed, as we've seen Mark Waid has been hired at DC to write some of the, some small stories, nothing major ongoing, but yeah, he's been hired there. So, things can reverse. Typically, if you get on that full-blown company legal mandated no hire list, you never come off of it, typically, because generally what puts you on it are things that cause the company liability. And so if you find yourself in an argument with somebody, and I'm saying this for your own benefit, If you find yourself in an argument with somebody over a blacklist saying, they put people on blacklists, and the other person is telling you that's absurd, you're having maybe a bad faith argument. You're basically arguing what you think is the same thing, but you're not. The person you're arguing with is basically, laying out the case or putting out the information for the not picked group of people versus the formal blacklist, which is what you're talking about. That's where this disagreement in communication happens. Because one I see a lot is I see people say, Chuck Dixon was banned from working at DC, and a lot of people poke holes in that and laugh at that. And they do that because they can very rapidly point to the 2017, and I think it went into 2018. That was less than 3 years ago, or about 3 years ago. The Bane Conquest, which was a series for DC that Chuck Dixon did. They've also reprinted Chuck Dixon's work. They're giving Chuck Dixon a check today in royalties. I don't know, maybe not today, but yesterday or a week from now. They give Chuck Dixon royalty checks. That's my point. So if you're having this argument saying, "Oh, Chuck Dixon's blacklisted from DC," the problem is you're not going to win that argument because people can point to recent works he's done. However, what perhaps has happened is he has been deemed difficult to work with. Now, just to be clear, I'm using as an example. I see his name come up a lot as somebody who's been blacklisted. I have no idea. I have not asked a single editor, anyone within DC, what Chuck Dixon's status is. I have no idea. But that's often the way this kind of bad faith argument takes place. And that's what's going on in comics. What I really wanted to stress here, though, is kind of this concept of, editors kind of passing over you, not picking you for work. And the fact that there can be legitimate reasons and there can be illegitimate reasons why that happens to people. Some of it may be laziness. Some of it may be, maybe laziness is too harsh a word. Maybe it's more along the lines of, the person is too busy with 8 books. They have enough time to properly manage 4. So they reach out to the people they're comfortable working with who they know will, cause them less work. And that's who gets hired. That's frankly a lot of the situation. And by the way, that's not just comics, it's every industry. That's often how, freelance consulting, networking type stuff works. People reach out for others who are going to cause them as little trouble as possible, and they throw them into the thing, usually because they're in a hurry. And then there's, the example of somebody can't understand how the other person's talking, which I think is bullshit. I have certain relatives who are Asian. I think you have to figure it out. We have a wide world with lots of different languages, lots of different accents, lots of different ways people talk. And if you're sitting around saying, "Well, I can't understand somebody," well, then you're just a prick. You should work harder. That's my opinion, anyway. I'm just saying. People who don't turn in their pages, people who, tell the editor, "Oh, sorry, I'm going to be late. I'm a week past my deadline. Sorry," and the editor go checks them out, and they're streaming on Twitch, playing some game, or they see them doing a pile of commissions. That's the kind of stuff that's going to put you on that, put on that list fairly. But that's often what's going on. I hope that's helpful. I guess we'll see. Certainly if many of you want to continue to kind of say, there's no difference between the two. There is a significant difference. I'm not saying whether you need to agree with it or not. That's not the point. I'm just telling you, in comics, there is that factor. And generally speaking, if I was to break it down, I would say it would be 95% of the time, it's the editor doesn't want to work with somebody because they feel they're too difficult for one reason or another, fair or unfair, versus 5% of the people that are actually on a formal company blacklist. The company blacklist is probably not used very often. And the reason being, if you get put on a no hire list, then you're engaging with a number of other teams, most notably legal. And if you send anything to legal, it's going into the black hole of your soul, and it's going to take a lot of time. So people don't use that casually, and that's what's going on. Anyway, there you go. There's my opinion for you. Let me know your thoughts below. Like and subscribe, and thanks for listening.